So I've been waiting for this one for a long time.
This has been a long time coming.
Yeah, man, this is awesome. So AJ Eads, longtime friend, 15-year plus friend.
I think coming up on 17 years.
17 years?
Yeah,
how far
because
we
we
are?
met right when I was around 20 years old. And
My God.
I'm 37 now, so
Exactly.
there you go.
My God. We've been, yeah. So lifelong friend, and I've been wanting to do this one. We've been trying to schedule this one for probably a few weeks, and super excited. We're going to deep dive into some things that AJ's done. Some of the stuff he's done is pretty incredible, and a couple of organizations, or a organization he's working for right now and working with right now is doing some incredible things, and his hobbies will excite the viewership, I guarantee it. So without further ado, so dude, one of the things I wanted to jump into right away was tell me a little bit, man, about the new RV, the bus, the renovation,
Sure.
what you're doing and how you're shaping your life right now.
Yeah, so over the last 5 or so years, I have been an independent marketing consultant. That's kind of what I do as a career. And so I work with a couple of different companies, your company
Yes.
being one of them, to help them, get more exposure, reach more customers, and tell their story a little bit better. And so over that 5-year period, I met this incredible girl, my girlfriend, Sarah, soon to be, as I'm sure all of our friends are asking, fiance at some point in the near future.
Exactly.
And we have some really great friends that you also know. Some friends of ours bought an RV several years ago, and they gutted it with the idea that they were going to renovate it and turn it into their kind of travel mobile and just have this really fun thing to do.
Right.
And life changed, and an opportunity for them to move to the West Coast came up, and so they took that opportunity, and the bus kind of became this afterthought. And quite frankly, they kind of forgot that they had it. And it sat dormant for about 3 years, and one day my girlfriend kind of proposed, hey, there's that RV sitting over there. What if we renovated it ourselves and took it as an opportunity to move somewhere else in the United States? We've both spent quite a bit of time in St. Louis. Sarah didn't grow up here, but I did. And so we want to kind of explore the country. We both think somewhere out west might be a good fit, and we don't really know where. We think the Pacific Northwest might be a good fit.
There you go.
Somewhere Oregon, Washington, something like that. But we didn't really know how to figure out, do we just up and move? I mean, we both kind of have a flexible lifestyle in our careers.
Yeah, it's probably a little more complex, right?
Yeah, well, we're not beholden necessarily to a job, right? So
Right.
my clients all allow me to work remotely, which is great. So we can kind of explore different cities without having to say like, hey, I'm going to take a job in marketing for this one company and I'm going to be sitting there in this one city. And so we came up with this idea, hey, let's see if we can maybe buy this bus from our friends for a very nominal fee, and they were really, really great with us in helping us kind of acquire the thing at a very reasonable term.
To be clear,
Yeah.
never driven an RV, owned an RV, done anything RV related in your entire life. This is a
100%
from
fresh,
the hip. I
dove
want to do
in.
this. Let's do it.
Yeah, so the kind of genesis of this really came from my friend Bob and I had talked quite a bit. I'm really into the outdoors. I like backpacking, and I've gotten into fly fishing lately, but hiking and adventuring and traveling always seemed like a fun idea.
Right.
And so I had dreamed of renovating an ambulance, a van, a school bus. I mean, I'd really gone through the gamut of different ideas, and I'd presented lots of those ideas to my friend Bob because we'd both like to brainstorm together, just like you and I do.
Yeah.
And he and his now wife just literally one day, they were in the position to say, hey, we want to try something like this, and they bought this RV kind of on a whim. Same thing. Never owned one, never driven anything like it. And they bought a 30-foot bus and just jumped right in. It's 30 years old almost, and they gutted it and parked it. And so when we bought it from them, same thing. I've never driven an RV. I've never owned an RV. A friend of mine towed a pop-up camper once with my dad's pickup truck. Like, that's as far as I've gotten.
And there's never, and you received this thing completely pretty much gutted, right? I mean,
I mean, when I say gutted, like it had a working kitchen and a largely working bathroom. There was some water damage considerably to the interior walls of one of the sides. It needed a whole new roof. It needed a lot of love and care on the inside. It needed to be painted. It needed new furniture. Lots of things
this is
needed
like
to be
a
done.
renovation / Whole thing.
It's
Okay.
like gut rehabbing a house, basically.
Nice.
We
Okay.
left a lot of the working systems in place. So a lot of the plumbing and the gas lines and the electrical, all those things largely worked, which was great. So that kept us kind of in good working order. We did have to have a lot of work done on the plumbing system to kind of figure out some things that had been changed by previous owners. But we were lucky to find a local RV guy. Shout out to Dan, the RV repair guy. He's been fantastic. If you own an older RV, so here's a little kind of story. If you own an older RV, and especially if you're new to this, it's a great way to kind of get into the hobby of RVing, right? If you want to just have a $5,000, $6,000 investment, you can go out and buy a working, driving RV. You really can.
And just to be clear, I think we had a couple conversations about this, but it was not exactly simple to be like, hey, I have a 30-year-old Bounder. Do you have a guy who can wrench on that? And you were like, whoa.
Yeah.
Difficult to find Dan.
Yeah,
to the point where you
so
found him.
so that's kind of where I was headed, is that basically I acquired this bus. We did a lot of the kind of interior cosmetic stuff, repairing the water damage. We did some repair work to the roof ourselves. We did everything that we could try to figure out. My girlfriend and I kind of exhausted ourselves doing what we could. And then we kind of hit this wall where it was like, all right, mechanically, plumbing wise, electrically, some of these things are just over our heads.
Right.
And I started doing lots of phone calls, RV dealerships in the area. I won't name any names, but very few pleasant experiences. And the basic gist of what we understood was, if you own an RV that's more than about 10 or 15 years old, most of the dealerships in town don't want to work on them. They don't have inventory. They have a hard time getting parts, or so they say. And it's just that they've got enough inventory of service clients that they don't need it. And so they basically just turn you away. And unfortunately, they didn't offer anybody as an alternative. I had one that I want to say Midwest RV Center sent me to folks that own horses and that travel with their horses. Sometimes the trailers have coaches
stuff
built into them.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a horse coach builder or repair shop in Peevely that I think it was Midwest RV Center, referred me to and just said, hey, we're booked up for the next 2 months. We can't see you for anything until then. And even then it would be difficult because your RV is as old as it is. We would send you here. So they at least gave me an alternative.
Yeah.
And so I made lots of calls, did lots of Googling, and I ended up finding this guy who's just a guy, right? It's just Dan. And Dan has a background in carpentry and plumbing. He's been a mechanic his whole life. He's done a bunch of stuff.
You almost have to be like a handyman.
He's
in
a
this
jack
scenario,
of all trades handyman.
But a guy who specializes per se in understanding these systems.
Yeah, and so and he's raced motorcycles, so he's like really a hands-on mechanical type of guy. And he charges very fair prices. He can come to you or you can bring it to him.
That's convenient.
It's been a thank you, Dan. It's been a serious, huge advantage for us because, I mean, it's literally, I think Dan charges, don't quote me on this, but it's probably somewhere in the range of half to 2/3 of what a dealership would charge you. He's typically seeing you the same week or the next week versus 2 months later.
Yeah, you said the responsiveness and everything was...
He's been great.
Awesome.
And it really gave us a vote of confidence that we actually could move the projects that we were struggling with. We have a generator issue that he's going to help us address.
Nice.
So he's really helped us move some balls forward that I think would have been a struggle. So one of the things that I would definitely advise if you're considering getting an older RV and you're not mechanically inclined or you don't have a lot of experience in repair work, things like that, try to find somebody locally through Google or Facebook. Try to find someone like Dan if you can. Definitely, RV dealerships can be great, but if you can find someone local like that, it really makes a big difference in how much you're going to invest and your confidence in the RV.
Right. I mean, so you get this thing, you get Dan. Dan is able to get you mechanically sound.
Mm-hmm.
You guys did some very nice, I saw some aesthetics as far as you took care of the floors and countertops and decor looked great. Made it livable, turned a space into a home kind of.
Yeah, and I'm very lucky that my girlfriend has a fantastic sense of taste and style, and she's really helped bring it all together. She makes decisions that I would never think about, and so I bought a shower curtain or something like that, or maybe some towels that matched our bedspread, and I thought I was doing a great job. And she was like, "We've got so many patterns in this place. We just need solid colors." And I was like, never would think about that. And she's made some really great choices as far as she's included some items that make it feel kind of, masculine, and there's lots of touches that make it feel, feminine, so that it fits both of us. We spent a ton of time, and we had kind of this wild story ordeal that we won't go into today because it's too long for this hour. Maybe on another episode.
Yeah, exactly.
We did a butcher block countertop to replace the existing laminate countertop. We bought a block of butcher block from IKEA. It was on deep sale, so we got it for like $75.
Dude.
And then I basically cut out the same shape as the countertop we pulled out. I just jigsaw and sanding.
I remember when I walked in after you guys had done some of the decor stuff, and you look at the outside of the bounder, and I don't think it's any secret. It's not exactly like a sexy exterior.
It looks like a classic RV
classic old
from the
RV.
early 90s, which is what it is.
When you walk in, you're like, wow. Really nice, really well laid out. By the way, guys, definitely I'll make sure I got a link, and I'm going to actually talk to you guys here in a little bit about AJ's podcast that he runs and his show that he does. You guys will be able to get some ideas and some links and see that stuff, I think, here on his channel. So
Sure.
That'll be really cool.
Yeah.
So you got this thing together, pretty much together. You've already started kind of outdoorsing in it.
Yeah.
Tell me about a couple places you guys have went just recently. I know you went to the fishing trip at Montauk.
Yeah.
And how that's went, the pluses and minuses of having it there.
Sure. So one of the goals, obviously, for the bus, as I kind of mentioned earlier, is to get to the point where we can take this thing on kind of a longer term journey and hopefully use it to figure out where we want to live. So again, Sarah and I's careers are both fairly mobile. So what we want to be able to do is take, our first goal was to take this grand 1 year long journey, kind of a big push off from St. Louis.
Right.
COVID hit. Obviously, that threw some, wrenches in the mix because, campsites got to really limited inventory. Some of them weren't allowing interstate travel unless you were for necessary workers.
So you can't take an RV and just go park wherever you want necessarily because of COVID right now?
Well, you can for in some instances, right? So you can still go to National Forest land. You can still go to BLM land. You can still go to some Walmart parking lots. There's still lots of areas that you can go park. But most campsites are at some sort of limited inventory. So maybe they're going to every other site being available just to try and keep people a little more distanced.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
I know a lot of KOAs out there have done the same thing just to try and kind of keep people at a little bit more distance. They're limiting the facilities that are open. So where they would normally have a swimming pool available in the summer, maybe that's not available.
Probably a bummer too, because you want the full experience, and with this happening, obviously it takes that and draws it back quite a bit.
Yeah, one of the things that I really look forward to in this whole experience is meeting some really great people along the way, and that's really what makes a city for me, right, is the people and who you interact with and their stories and what they do. And so what I really want to do is use our bus as an opportunity to move from city to city and kind of get to know the people for a couple of weeks and see, hey, is this our kind of folks? Do we enjoy it here? Do we laugh a lot? Do we like the activities that are available? And if we don't, we move on. And if we do, maybe we still move on, but we come back. And so the whole thought process kind of the whole time has always been meet people. And when you have this environment that we're in now, and I understand why, and rightfully so, where it's difficult for us to kind of interact with people at a social
level. Hard to come
level.
together today.
Yeah,
it sucks.
And a lot of times these KOAs and these campsites and these great RV parks around the country are very social environments. They have these great campfire settings and they have cool things to do.
Remember when we went fly fishing, that was one of the cool things we had was there were several people around us that we could interact with.
Yeah, and I pre-COVID, we went over, I think it was January or February that we went fishing.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID, before that had happened yet, we saw a guy at the 2-3 campsites down. I went down, asked him some questions about his truck. How did you build that? Where'd you get it? And it was this great conversation.
And we were jumping in the stream, I remember, with a couple guys too that one day, and we were just kind of BSing back and forth the whole time, and we're fishing and shit.
Exactly.
It's great.
Exactly.
So
to revisit your question, some of the campsites that we've really liked that we've visited with our bus, quite frankly, it's been limited so far. We've taken it to a friend's house kind of over near Columbia who's got a nice piece of land, and we had some kind of weird battery issues there, so we had to leave it there for a week. Thank you to our buddy who let us leave our bus in his driveway for a week.
Nice.
And then actually drove us back to St. Louis and came back to Columbia
Super
that
cool.
night. Great guy. And, you know, we've taken it to Montauk, I don't know, 3 or 4 times now between yourself and myself and my girlfriend and I. We've had some issues with our dog while we've been down there, so we've had to ditch early. But we finally had a couple of trips that were starting to feel really confident with the bus. We had one in the middle of the summer where the air conditioning really had to run all day.
Yeah.
It's 95 degrees outside all day, and we were comfortable and cool in the bus with our dogs, which was great.
Yeah. That was one thing that when we went that I was super happy about, man. I think we talked about that. I mean, we went out, we fished all day, but came
Yeah,
and
the
we
winter.
watched the UFC fight. We had great food. We slept comfortably, and you're just
Exactly.
like, man, this is a whole nother experience. Not that the tent camping and hammock camping, which we're going to get into in a minute, isn't awesome, but man, it really just changes the level of which you wake up in the morning and go, all right, I'm ready to hit it.
Yeah. You know, I think it's great to have a balance of all of them, right? To have all those different experiences. So to do some tent camping, to do some RVing, to do some hammock backpacking, all that kind of stuff. And it's been great to kind of go through this experience with my girlfriend because some of the stuff has been really challenging. Some of it has been terrifying. Driving, for any of you out there that are gonna pick one of these things up at first, here's my little PSA. Smaller is better early because you'll be a lot more confident driving it. I was terrified for like the first 4 trips that we took on it.
I remember when we drove down, I was like, this thing is
It's
like driving an 18-wheeler.
It really takes some tweaking and some getting used to it. And, you know, one of the things when you've got a 30-year-old wall basically driving, because it's a big flat sheet of you know, fiberglass and plastic and all that. So wind really affects
you. Just feel like you're,
And, you know, just a little bit of a body roll really feels like you're going. And so
Well,
you
and
really...
I remember, God forbid, you got to get up and walk to the back in transit, and you're like, all right,
yeah.
arms out, here we go.
Yeah.
You know, you're trying to make sure you can make it.
And if you're new to it and you're between 2 18-wheelers and it's a little bit misty out and there's a wind and you're kind of getting moved side to side, it can be really intimidating.
Yeah.
And so, just learning how to drive them, I think, is a big advantage in going smaller earlier if you're going to go with like
definitely
a drivable one. And then the second thing would be it also opens up a lot more sites and a lot more places to you when you have a smaller RV.
So if you scratched what you did and you were like, hey, you know what, 2.0 is going to be...
If we were going to do it all over again, I think we would try to do something like a 20-foot Class C. Because it gives you
a little more compact.
Well, it's 10 feet shorter than ours.
Okay,
right.
So it's a 20-footer.
So,
right.
You don't have nearly as much hanging off the back end. Which, if you're in dips and things like that, if you're in some rockier terrain, we've got a lot hanging off the back where you can kind of ground out. It gives you a lot more opportunities in kind of boondocking scenarios where you're trying to be inconspicuous and just kind of park in a parking lot somewhere and be off grid.
Yes.
It gives you a lot more chances there. It makes it moving through cities way easier.
Oh gosh, I can't imagine driving through a big city in a 30-footer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or just across bridges and things like that. It's a whole different experience. And then so it's where you can go and it's the driving experience. Those are the 2 biggest reasons that I would encourage people if this is your first go of it, go smaller.
Okay.
But the big thing that I would encourage is everybody should do it because, and at least for me and for my girlfriend, I think it's been a really great growth experience for both of us.
Yeah.
It's been a great trial on our relationship just because you have to go through some things that are difficult and you have to, we've had things that have cost more money than we thought they were going to.
I remember some of those conversations, and you're like, dude, you'd be surprised. He's like, it's 200 here, 800 there, 1,000 here, 1,500 there, and you're like,
and some of the things
holy
are
cow.
$50 here and $20 there, but what you forget about is when you paint the bus, right? When you paint the inside of the bus and you're painting the cabinetry, for example, Are you going to go home and be diligent about cleaning out your brushes and making sure they're maintained, or are you going to pitch them? And if you pitch them, you're going to have to buy more brushes next time. And a new brush is $10 at minimum, and sometimes they're 15, depending on what kind of brush you need.
Yeah.
If you go through 10, 15 brushes over the course of a project, you've got $150 in brushes. And those little things, sandpaper, brushes, fasteners, cabinet hinges,
all of it. Yeah.
All those little things add up to thousands of dollars. And, we were really lucky.
I mean, I remember.
We've gone through $400 in batteries, and we've gone through, umpteen dollars in wood, and trying things and having it fail.
You mentioned storage.
Yeah. And so we pay to have it stored somewhere. So it's all been a great experience, and I would tell everybody it's been worth every penny, because it has shown me, like, I knew from day one that Sarah was the girl. But over the last 4 years, we've gone through enough things together that have been challenging and that have allowed us to have fun together. I've figured out that we enjoy traveling together. We enjoy the challenges of the bus together. And so it's been great for us as kind of a proving ground to be like, hey, this is going to work.
That is pretty cool. Yeah, that's definitely one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up, was the fact that I think sometimes people look at the Facebook and Instagram photo initially of you jumping out of a really nice bus, be like, hey, and nobody takes into account the months, years of work, preparation, time, sweat, blood, tears, money that is tossed into making that happen. So, and it's kind of cool to hear that story about, hey, we got this thing as a gutted block, parked in front of us, and today it's a functioning home.
The sooner that you adapt the mindset of, like, we're going to just take it as it comes and deal with it and figure it out, and the adventure is a big part of it, the more fun you have. Because, I mean, we've put in an enormous amount of work to get to where we're at now. We really felt like going into our last trip that we really had, made a ton of progress.
Right.
The water was working, the heat was working, all these things were going right. And we got down to Montauk State Park, which is one of our favorite places here in southern Missouri, central Missouri, I guess you could call it. And it's one of the 4 trout fishing parks here in Missouri. It's beautifully managed. It's got a great hatchery, so there's a ton of great stocked fish there in the streams. It's on a beautiful headwaters of the Current River, which is a spring-fed river here in Missouri.
Right.
And it's a great campsite. The whole park is really well managed, and lots of great, fun things to do. And we got down there, and we knew it was going to rain, but we didn't know it was going to rain as hard as it was going to rain, and we didn't know it was going to rain basically the entire trip.
The entire time you're there, yeah. That was a rough one.
And so 2 things happened. Literally the first minute that we were there, Sarah noticed that we had water leaking in both of our side windows. Like streams coming down the wall where we'd had water damage before. So I'm immediately panicking, because we have not had, in the 2 years since we fixed the roof that we've been working on this, any interior water issues. So this was like, where is this coming from out of nowhere? And I started to realize, maybe the sealant around the windows isn't great. Maybe I should probably clean out the weep drains and all these other little things that have been in my mind that I probably should have done earlier.
Right.
But what the outcome was is that I had to get up on the roof in the middle of I don't want to call it a thunderstorm, but a heavy rain.
A heavy rainstorm, yeah.
And basically drape tarps over the side of our bus so that they would cover the window where this water was leaking.
So it was kind of a gutter, per se, to run off.
Yeah, just a flashing, right, that would just go over the window. And so now we're the Hoosiers in the campsite that have, like, big tarps hanging off the side of our already older bus. And I'm out there with bungee cords trying to, like, keep the whole thing strapped down. And there's not really any natural connection points. So I'm, going to handles on the cabinets and all kinds of random stuff. That's the stuff that you remember from a trip. Mm-hmm. It's not sitting around the picturesque campfire. I don't even remember if we had a campfire on that trip. It's the stuff that is a little challenging.
Inserts a little adversity into the trip.
Exactly. Yeah. And when we got back, it motivated me to say, okay, I'm going to strip all of the weather stripping off all the windows on that side of the bus. I'm going to redo all of the caulking. I'm going to clean all the drains. And now I feel a lot more confident that if we
next
do get
trip, you can get rained out and you're going to be fine.
And we'll be great. And inevitably something else will happen on that trip.
And it's kind of like an experiment. That's the thing. You know, make an adaptation, take it out and test it. Something happens. All right, fix it on site. Adaptation, go out a little longer, fix it. If it happens, if not, you coast. And that's when you know you're ready to go.
Exactly. And I think the big thing to kind of remember is just don't expect that nothing wrong is going to happen.
Yeah.
The second that you assume that it's all just going to be easy and that everything's going to go your way, something's going to, Murphy's Law, right? If it can go wrong, it will. And so if you just kind of go out and just say like, hey, we're going to take it as it comes and I'm going to enjoy it as much as I can.
Yeah.
You'll have a lot more fun. And it's been a great adventure so far.
Awesome, man. So that's going to segue into my next question, which is really like, you got me into backpacking. You got me into going outside more often, and that's kind of taken off since obviously we did that, a few years back. But where did that start with you, and how did it grow to where it is today?
Yes. So I was really fortunate and lucky in many ways that my parents sent me to this great little school here in St. Louis called the College School of Webster Groves. Shout out TCS. And the college school is really focused on experiential learning, right? If you do it, you'll have a better chance of absorbing it and holding on to it and learning it.
Right.
And so they've got an organic greenhouse garden where their students are growing a lot of the food that's being cooked for their own meals. So they're literally seeing farm to table at the school, and they're cooking a lot of that food. And a big part of what their focus is on outdoor education, right? It's how do we take care of the planet, and how do we be good stewards? How do we be good humans? And I think they focus, a lot of their attention on kind of how to be a good human, which is a great way to grow up.
Right.
And they focus a lot, like I said, on outdoor education. And so when you start in preschool, there's kind of like days in the park, and then each night from there on out, they kind of add a night to their annual camping trip. And so
this is built into the culture the day you show up.
For sure, right? And so by the time you hit 5th, 6th grade, you're spending, 36 hours in a cave. You're spending 4 or 5 nights portaging with canoes from lake to lake and doing backpacking through Kentucky. And it really ends in 8th grade with this huge field ecology trip where they go canoeing through the Okefenokee swamps in Georgia, I believe, with alligators literally at their sides. They're gathering biology samples off the Sapelo Islands, off the coast. It's this really exhaustive, like 8 or 9 day trip.
Wow.
And all along, obviously, they're building in lots of lessons in science and all kinds of fun stuff. So I did a lot of that growing up.
So you were fascinated by that at a young age,
young age. I don't know that I ever was like, when I got home, I wasn't sitting there going, Dad, I got to go do more of this camping stuff, right? I was super focused on sports, baseball, soccer, track and field, that was my jam growing up. But it certainly fostered a lower fear of the outdoors, right? So I wasn't scared of sleeping in a sleeping bag in a tent by the time I hit college or high school. I'd done it plenty of times. So even though it wasn't necessarily this like huge passion of mine, I still did it very comfortably.
Now, when we started doing it, I remember it was a big thing about unplugging.
Yeah.
It was like, hey, you know what? This is a way to just turn off the phone, kill the email for a while, and recenter.
Yeah, so we're of a unique generation, you and I are, that we have a very distinct memory of life before the internet, but then we're really right in the heart of the generation that knows how to use it about as efficiently as anybody else. So we kind of have this weird simultaneous view of both worlds, right? And we remember what life was like when 5:30, 5 o'clock hit and you went home from work, and that was the end of your workday. Like, you might be thinking about strategy for the next day, but people weren't calling you, texting you, emailing you. There wasn't a CRM on your phone that you were logging your day's activities.
You weren't dialed in all day, all night, all the time.
And always reachable, right? It was just like a lot of times your work didn't have your phone number at home except for like emergencies. So I got invited to a float trip by some friends of mine from high school. I want to say probably going on 9 years ago now. And it was this really cool opportunity because it did exactly what you said. it was a float trip where it was the first time that I had been without cell phone reception for a consistent period of time for like 3 days. And we hit this river. It was like, I think 12 of us on the trip, maybe 6 canoes or so. And for the first 3 or 4 hours of the trip, I was still kind of in normal mode. And then maybe the right song came on the radio. We had a little Bluetooth speaker, and it, you know, guys had downloaded some music, and it just hit me like, oh, I'm not going to be able to check anything for the next 2 days. Interesting. And then all of a sudden, it just, this whole weight of everything that I'd been thinking about for the last 10 years, business, sales, marketing, emails, texts, Instagram, social media, like the whole thing just went and just like washed off of me. And I was like, oh my God. And I really enjoyed the next 2 days, and I really was present with all my friends. I was looking them in the face while I was having these conversations with them, which had kind of been absent for a while.
Social
and
experiences live.
Yeah. And I took the time to hear people's stories and listen to them and really kind of engage. And it was this unbelievably rewarding experience. And so I went back to St. Louis after that weekend. I was like, this is my thing. I'm going to be an outdoorsman. I'm going to go backpacking. And
I don't give a shit if I do anything else. I'm going to be in the woods all the time.
Yeah, right? And one of the things that it's kind of over my 5-year journey that I've realized through this whole thing is that I'm a gear guy. I've been a gear guy my whole life.
That's true.
Just always been into it. And the outdoors feeds gear junkies needs, right?
Yeah,
it really gets you what you need because there's so many options. There's so many hobbies.
Yeah, man. I remember you're like, dude, I got a new cook set. We're going to try it out. We go out and do something. You'd be like, I didn't really dig it, but I bought this other one. I got another cook set.
100%. And it's the iterative process of getting closer and closer to the perfect setup.
Now there is, and I will say that is the cool thing I learned about backpacking with you was there's a good way and a comfortable way to do it and do it right, in my opinion. You don't keep the pack so heavy. You got all the right stuff. You can make it through the trip comfortably. And then I've tried to do it kind of the rougher way where I've been like, I'm just going to stuff all this shit in this bag and we're going to go out and have fun. And I'm like, a quarter of the way through the trip. So those iterations, as most people, a lot of people who don't do it on a regular basis don't realize it. They think, let's go to REI. Let's pick up a backpack. Let's go out in the woods. And you don't realize, like, holy shit, like you could be 30 pounds heavier than you need to be with the same stuff to get through the same trip.
Well, and I will say this. I've kind of iterated my approach to helping friends with gear over the years, and you've been kind of a part of that. I used to really kind of tell people, like, hey, this is what you should do. You should just skip all this other stuff. Buy this thing that I tell you to buy because I've done it all and I know what to do. And
it's a good,
almost nobody takes the advice. And I didn't take the advice of all the YouTubers and the podcasters and everybody else that I was watching when I got into it. They had done all the experiences that I had done. They said, hey, you don't need heavy boots. Just go the trail runner option. I avoided that for 3 years. Now I'm wearing trail runners. They said, avoid these heavy backpacks. Get this one. It's less expensive and it's lighter. I bought the heavy one. Eventually got tired of it and bought the lighter one, even though this one was less expensive. And made all the same mistakes that everybody else does.
So your approach is to test it, and that's kind of your thing. That's what you enjoy is knowing the knowledge base of it.
The big thing for me was that everybody's going to iterate different, and some people have a different preference to their gear. So rather than telling someone, like, this is where you should start, it's better to just let them start wherever the hell they want. And then they'll figure it out from there.
They'll find their way.
Now, if you have someone that walks up and says, I have $1,000. You tell me what to buy and I'll go buy it. Then I'll give you a great recommendation of what to spend.
Right.
But if you're just like, I'm thinking about this pack or that pack, I'll be like, dude, get whichever one you think's better. Because they'll inevitably do the same thing that I did, or maybe they'll just be cool with it and go. I mean, there's some people that, I got a friend named Joe. He was on one of my podcast episodes. Joe is not a gear guy. It's just not his thing. I've been on multiple I've been on one backpacking trip with Joe, and he carried somehow less weight than me. He's never thought about what he buys, but he brought so little stuff that he basically had nothing. And so I think his total pack was like 12 pounds.
Remember you telling me this was the multi-guy trip, right? There was like
it was like three guys and a couple of dogs. And we had a great trip, and it was super fun. And shout out to Joe and Gus. And we had a great trip, but one of the things that I realized, I was like, oh, you don't have a headlamp, you don't have a water filter, you don't have a cook set, you don't have a stove.
Jesus.
You didn't bring a jacket, and it's going to be, 40 degrees tonight.
Just get out there with your
And there's nothing to say that Joe didn't have more fun than me, right?
That's true.
So everybody's got to do their thing. They got to figure it out on their own. So if someone like really asks me for advice, then I'll offer it. And my podcast, my whole channel is all about just telling people what I've experienced. So if they're looking for advice, they can have it.
And that's something I want to do. I definitely want to give a shout out to AJ right now. He has a phenomenal podcast. I have been a guest on it. More of a reason to go watch. So, but there's definitely a few episodes in there you should check out. Some of the stuff we can't dig into today that I definitely will have him back on for is like his trip to Yosemite. But you can catch all that content on Outdoors Podcast. The link will be attached, so check that out, definitely.
Yeah, outdoorspodcast.com. Pretty simple website to find.
The whole works.
And it's got episodes of my podcast. It's got YouTube videos, articles, photos. It's basically
The whole
just
works.
everything lives on the website, so that's the easiest way to find and connect with the channel. But it's got Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, kind of all the normal stuff.
So the last thing I want to dig into is you've been with this organization, this security organization. It's a non-for-profit for the last few years. You've done some – I remember when you had 7 sheets of, like, white paper taped across a room, and you're like, these are the 90 objectives I have to hit in the next 3 months, when it was infancy and just a name to where it is today. So if you could – bring us up to speed pretty quickly.
Yeah. So I got really lucky in 2015. I started my own little marketing consulting company called Eads Consulting. My dad had a construction company called Eads Construction. We're super original people, especially being a marketing guy, real creative name. But basically, I decided after a career in sales and marketing for the last, I'd say, 15 years, and having worked at a number of different agencies, from a small graphic design website development firm to kind of more of a everyday marketing firm for the mid-sized firm here in St. Louis, all the way up to a national PR company in Elasticity, which is a great company to work for. It gave me kind of a breadth of experience, and I really wanted to kind of dig in with actual clients and do the day-to-day marketing stuff. And so
you didn't want to be the agency rigmarole. You'd been there. You didn't feel like there was enough attention there, or what was your thoughts?
Oh, no,
on the
definitely
difference?
a ton of attention. I mean, it was great for the clients. It's just that as a business development and kind of a strategist guy, I would get to bring the client in and kind of help drive some of the general idea of where they were going to go.
You didn't like the handoff.
But then, it got handed off to the account team, and they got great designers and developers and all these people, and it was awesome. But then my job was to go out and find another client. And one of the things, kind of the story that I tell about my youth, my dad had this small construction company that did, prefabricated metal buildings here in St. Louis. So he built warehouses and manufacturing facilities, things like that. Nothing super sexy, but he did a really good job. And when I was a kid, he would drive me to school most days, and I would see McCarthy construction trucks go driving by, and these big white trucks with the bold red logo, McCarthy. And it always made this impression on me because I would see them with kind of consistency and often enough that it kind of gave me frequency. And I used to ask my dad, like, why don't you have, a white dump truck with your name on the side? Because if you did, then you'd be bigger. And I didn't really understand that that's not how construction companies work.
The bigger truck, the bigger company.
100%. That's what I thought, right? My dad had a little blue pickup, and these guys drove great big white dump trucks, like Mack dump trucks. And so I thought they're big. And little did I know it was like a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah, they were huge then.
Huge, right?
Huge now, yeah.
And so I really became fascinated with the idea of, like, how do I help the company like my dad feel like the company like McCarthy? And so I really had developed this kind of skill set, and a big thank you to Jimmy Sewell at Mascot Agency, a big thank you to all of my friends and everybody at Go Brand Go, and a big thank you to Aaron and Brian and Andy at Elasticity, the 3 owners there that really gave me a shot to learn from the way that they do things. I had a great opportunity to interact with literally 100 clients over my 5-year span in the agency world. And so I got to see really great approaches and what worked for lots of companies. And then I got to see some things that didn't work to avoid. And so I'd kind of built this really well-rounded, I believed, skill set.
Nice base, yeah.
A nice base, right?
Yeah.
And I felt like I could go out and work with 4 or 5 companies at a time and help them build their story and get more exposure and feel more confident that they were connected to the market. And so I started calling all of my old clients and just saying, hey, you know what it's like to work with me, companies that weren't working with the agencies anymore. And if you know anyone that needs help, you know what it's like to work with me, I'd love to help. And one of my clients, a guy by the name of Clayton, said, yeah, hey, I just took over as the executive director of this great organization. I got out of the company that I was working for, and I need some help. And a communications marketing guy would be a big assistance right now. So I got brought into this organization called the Security Advisor Alliance. It's a nonprofit that operates globally around
And just to be clear, they're a St. Louis-based nonprofit?
No. So, I mean, technically our headquarters, our office is here, but I'm the only staff member for the Alliance that lives in St. Louis.
Okay.
Our executive director is based on the West Coast in LA, and we've got members literally all over the globe. We've got about 600 plus around the United States, and then we've got lots around in other continents. Shout out to Neil Thacker and the whole crew in the UK and in South Africa. He's been doing a great job helping us spread the word. So,
and when you guys started, because I remember those first few weeks you were with them, all the things you just mentioned, was any of that in place?
Yeah, so when Clayton got into the organization, like I said, in 2015, and then when he hired me pretty shortly after, the organization had been around for a couple of years. And a couple of the key members that kind of started the organization, which I don't think I really ever said what it does. It's a nonprofit in the cybersecurity space, and it was really the genesis of it was a bunch of chief information security officers, so the top cybersecurity executives at their companies, right, in Fortune 500 corporations, got together and said, hey, we should be helping each other. There are some vehicles that we can do it, but most of them make money off of us. If we did it for each other, maybe we can use any money that's generated for good, right? Maybe we can give it to community organizations. Maybe we can help kids get into cybersecurity. Maybe we could throw a cool conference that helps, junior people get more experience, all kinds of brainstormed ideas. And so for the first 2 years, it was just a volunteer organization. And then a few people that were kind of some more influential folks in the group said, hey, we think this thing needs some funding. And they influenced their company, a group by the name of Optiv Security, to get involved. And Optiv funded us for the first couple of years and really helped us hire staff like Clayton and myself and get us off the ground. They helped us organize our first summit. They provided a lot of assistance at different events and programs that we threw. And they helped us kind of get to, okay, now we know what we're going to do. We're going to tackle the talent gap. There's not enough people filling the open jobs.
And just to be clear, guys, so you guys get an idea on how bad the talent gap is, because I was very naive when I went to AJ. I was like, is there that big of a talent gap? It sounds like there's a ton of kids in computer science programs who spend all their spare waking hours on the internet. This should be easy. And you told me that.
So it's probably somewhere in the range of around 2.5 million open jobs on the market around the globe right now, with as many as probably 500,000 of those being in the United States, somewhere between 350 and 500,000 open positions.
Jesus, so it's worse than it was.
It's not improving. And if we don't start making some pretty serious investments in recruiting the next generation of talent and getting people trained up and educated, and it doesn't have to be a technical role. There's lots of, maybe 60 or 70% of those jobs are non-technical. So project management, program awareness, all kinds of other jobs. But I don't want to get too deep into the weeds. The organization over the last 5 years or so that I've been involved has really kind of seen this evolution, and it's evolved. We're into a really new kind of era for the Alliance, obviously with COVID. We can't go into schools and throw workshops to educate kids on why they'd want to get into the career like we used to. So over the last, I'd say 5 years, we really kind of evolved into this organization that was going to tackle the talent gap. And I think now we are looking into the future at we want to definitely, continue to tackle the talent gap and put resources to that. But I think we're also looking at how can we be not necessarily, not lobbyists or things like that per se, but how can we bring this collective of really bright cybersecurity minds together and form think tanks or focus groups to kind of inform the rest of the world on some best practices and what we can do to protect ourselves?
Inform and educate,
Yeah,
right? Like that's
absolutely.
kind of the whole thing. And then hopefully fill, like you said, that massive, massive gap that's going on in the industry.
Yeah, for example, one of the challenges that cybersecurity leaders are having right now in filling these open positions, let's say you're at a Fortune 500 company, most of those CHROs, the Chief Human Resources Officers, and the hiring departments at those big companies have traditionally looked for kids with college degrees.
Right.
A lot of great cybersecurity talent doesn't necessarily have to have a college degree. And so we've got to be able to come to the CHRO world of the Fortune 500 and say, hey, here's 35 or 40 chief information security officers that as a group are telling you, we don't need to check that box in our initial hiring process. It's not just your CISO that's telling you this, it's 40 of them.
Wow.
And they're at the biggest companies around the world. And we need to inform the ones that, or do case studies on the ones that have unchecked that box and seen a huge benefit and a huge uptick. And there's great organizations out there. I definitely want to draw attention. We've seen massive over the last 3 to 4 years, support from organizations like Microsoft. Really, Microsoft has been the driving force behind the alliance.
Yeah.
MasterCard has been a huge supporter of ours, and then kind of down the rung, a company called Risk IQ has done a great job. But these larger organizations have internships. Microsoft, MasterCard, they have internships for high school age kids that can start to get experience in the industry and figure out what tools are available.
So you're 18 right now. You're leaving your alma mater, John Burroughs, and you're like, hey, I'm pretty good at this whole computer thing. I'm not sure if I want to go to WashU or UMSL to study computer science, but I definitely want to intern somewhere if I do. What would be
So let's break it down even further from that. Let's take it away from a Burroughs kid, right? Because that kid's going to have lots of opportunities. I just did a podcast literally 2 days ago with an incredible young high school student.
Yes.
From Francis Howell High School here in St. Charles. He's a young man by the name of Lucas. I won't go into his last name to kind of keep a little bit of anonymity for him.
Going to be the Joint Chief of Staff.
He's a incredible young man. And
Yes.
Lucas, as part of his career placement program through his high school, started a LinkedIn account. And he started asking chief information security officers to connect with him, and then started feeding through LinkedIn each day, following the feeds, right? Looking at what people are posting.
Just to be clear, no instruction. He just did this.
No. So
came after
their
this.
CAPS program, which is Career Advanced Placement Studies.
Okay.
So he is in a technical program through his high school. He's got a 4.65 out of 4.0. He's a really bright kid.
gosh.
But
Yeah.
here's what's impressive about Lucas. It's not the 4.0 or 4.6. It's not the fact that he's been a math tutor. It's not the fact that he does this CAPS program. Take all that stuff aside. What impresses me about Lucas is his passion. When you talk to Lucas, it literally pours out of him.
Right.
And he saw a post on LinkedIn that there was a capture the flag exercise available. And he posted a comment and said, is this available to high school students? And traditionally, it really wasn't. And a colonel at Scott Air Force Base that's over their cybersecurity group saw this comment and said, I'm going to get this figured out, and placed them on an Air Force team that competed in a capture the flag competition with 1,000 teams, and their team got second place. So now Lucas is connected to guys.
Lucas is a genius.
So Lucas is now connected to part of the mission defense team at Scott Air Force Base. He's connected to a colonel that now knows he's super into cybersecurity. He's connected to CISOs in St. Louis, and he's posting about his experience on LinkedIn, which then caught my attention. So I invited him to be on our podcast. So now this 17-year-old kid is on a podcast in front of the entire country's cybersecurity community talking about his experience.
And guys, just to be clear, we've shifted from the Outdoors podcast. This is for the Security Advisors Alliance podcast.
We have a podcast as well.
Which, if you are a CISO or in that world or interested in that world, worth a listen.
If you have any interest in cybersecurity, check out our podcast. It's the Security Advisor Alliance podcast. It's available on all the channels. It's a pretty good listen. But Lucas what impresses you is the energy that he puts into it, right?
Right.
It's, I've gone on GitHub, I've looked at these projects, I've tried these different little workshops and different things. You don't care about all the success that he's had. It's his passion for the project. So if you're a high school kid that has any interest in cybersecurity, my biggest advice is start digging into anything that you can find, and then connect with as many people as you can that are already in the space and tell them what you're doing and ask them for what's next, because that's what's going to get you into the company without all the others boxes being checked.
Awesome. So 3 questions before we part ways, sir.
Okay.
Just off the cuff.
Sure.
Quickly answer.
All right.
Favorite cocktail with the drink or with dinner?
Favorite cocktail with the dinner, I would say pre-dinner is probably either an old fashioned or I'm getting into Manhattans now.
All right. Very nice.
Whiskey based.
Ooh, yeah, definitely. That's a win. Let's see. The other one I wanted to do, one football player. So AJ, even though we're not going to be able to deep dive in this, played some college football, did some really good, unique things
Very
here in
little
high school
amount of college football.
But had to have dinner with one football player all time. Who would it be?
Oh, man. One football player all time.
Live, dead, the whole works.
Man, I think it would probably have to be.
It cannot be Aaron Rodgers, though.
No,
'Cause
I
we
mean,
talk about it too
honestly, I think I'd probably want to figure out who has been in the consideration for the Walter Payton Man of the Year award the most, because that is really who is looked at as an example citizen of the NFL.
Yeah.
I'd want to have dinner or lunch with that person.
Okay.
I'd want to find out who's considered one of the best people. If it's not that person, it's definitely Brett Favre.
Brett Favre. Oh, yeah, there you go. The guy who never lays down.
Yeah.
All
I like
right.
the way he played the game.
That's awesome, man. And then you're a car guy.
Yeah. I've got a lot of experience with cars.
Mid-level car guy. Not crazy, not low end. All right, so one car, truck, bus, anything, go.
I think the best all-around vehicle on the market right now is probably the Ford Raptor. I think it's fast enough to be really, really fun. I think it's utilitarian enough to do just about anything you want it to, and I think it looks good enough that if you showed up outside of a fancy restaurant, if it was clean, I think you'd be all right. I think the best all-around vehicle of all time is probably the Porsche 911 Turbo. So I would say one of those two.
One of those in the garage as well. Yeah. Very good. Awesome, man. Well, hey, thanks for coming on. Guys, just to be, just keep an eye out when we release AJ's podcast. I'm going to make sure I have everything linked up for you for Outdoors Podcast, for the Security Advisors Alliance, the whole works. So you guys can check everything out and give him a follow. He loves to connect with his folks just as much as I do.
Thanks, man. This was fun.
Awesome, buddy.
See ya.